Welcome to our story today. Before we begin, let us know which city you are watching from by commenting below. Daniel Carter, at 30 years old, had become a symbol of success. He was the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, a genius highly praised for his leadership and sharp business vision. His apartment was located on the top floor of a skyscraper, surrounded by glass walls that offered a view of the city's glittering skyline. But behind that glamorous facade, no one knew that Daniel was constantly facing a strange emptiness, as if he were living in a cold, lonely world. That night, a biting winter wind swept through the city, covering everything in a layer of icy mist. Daniel ended a long day filled with tense meetings and the weight of endless decisions. He stepped out of his office feeling exhausted, longing to get home, shed his expensive suit, and sit quietly with his usual glass of whiskey. His black sports car sped through the deserted streets, the sound of the engine echoing in the quiet night. Suddenly, at an intersection, Daniel's headlights illuminated a scene he couldn't ignore. Across the street, huddled in front of a closed shop, was a young woman. She sat curled up, holding herself tightly, as if trying to fight off the piercing cold. Daniel's eyes froze, and he couldn't drive away immediately. In that brief moment, the images of his warm, luxurious apartment suddenly seemed indulgent, a stark contrast to the distressing sight before him. He pressed the gas pedal as the traffic light turned green, but the image of the woman lingered in his mind. She had tired eyes, a gaunt face, yet there was still something resilient about her. A strange feeling washed over Daniel, an inexplicable urge. Over the years, he had become accustomed to ignoring the heartbreaking scenes in the city, keeping a protective shell around himself to avoid being affected by societal issues. But tonight was different. Daniel turned his car into an alley, trying to find a way back. He wasn't sure exactly what was driving him, but the feeling was so intense that he couldn't ignore it. Returning to the intersection, he saw the woman still sitting there, her eyes unfocused, seemingly struggling to keep her eyelids from closing out of sheer exhaustion. He pulled his car to the side of the road, took a deep breath to dispel his hesitation, and stepped out. Daniel's footsteps echoed on the frost-covered sidewalk. He approached, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. "Hello," he spoke softly but firmly, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. The woman flinched, her eyes showing a brief flash of fear and wariness. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked. Even though he knew the question was unnecessary, she clearly wasn't okay. Her face was pale, and her lips were blue from the biting cold. The woman, Emily, stared at him, her eyes filled with suspicion. "What do you want?" Her voice was hoarse, weak, yet still held a glimmer of wariness. Daniel suddenly realized that his actions might be easily misunderstood. He was just a stranger, in an expensive suit, approaching a homeless woman on a freezing night. He quickly explained, trying to make his voice sound as sincere as possible. "I don't mean to bother you," he said. "I just saw you sitting here in this freezing cold. I have an apartment nearby. If you'd like, you can stay there for warmth." Emily narrowed her eyes, clearly distrustful. She'd encountered too many people who offered kind gestures only to regret accepting them. She had learned to protect herself, to never trust anyone easily. "Why?" she asked, her voice challenging. "Why do you want to help me?" Daniel didn't have a clear answer. He only felt that he had to do this, as if failing to act now would make the emptiness inside him unbearable. "It's just, no one should have to endure this," he said, his eyes full of sincerity. "You can leave whenever you want. I don't expect anything." Emily hesitated, wrestling with herself. She was exhausted, freezing, and she knew that staying outside tonight could be dangerous to her health, but she didn't want to trust a stranger. However, her weariness eventually overpowered her reasoning, and she sighed, giving a slight nod. "All right," she said softly, still cautious, "but if anything feels off, I'll leave immediately." Daniel smiled, relieved that she had agreed. He led her to his car, opened the door, and waited for her to get in. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive, but the air in the car seemed to warm up just a bit. It was the beginning of a story that no one could have predicted, a connection that would challenge them both in ways they never imagined. Daniel and Emily left behind the harsh cold of the city and stepped into the warmth and luxury of the spacious apartment Daniel called home. Emily couldn't hide her awe as she took in the lavish interior. Every piece of decor was refined, each detail arranged as if everything belonged to a world she had never imagined herself setting foot in. Daniel, though tired after a long day, tried to keep the atmosphere light. He guided her into the living room, where the soft glow from uniquely designed lamps illuminated the space, creating a cozy and gentle ambiance. "You can feel comfortable here," he said, his voice deep and soothing. "This is a safe place. You don't need to worry." Emily hesitated, taking slow, cautious steps inside, her hands still trembling from the cold that had seeped into her bones. She tried to hide her unease, but there was no denying that this apartment was like an entirely different world compared to the places she had ever lived. Her eyes scanned each painting on the walls, each expensive object, and she felt small and out of place in the luxurious surroundings. Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. He smiled gently, as if to reassure her, and said, "I'll get a few things ready. You can take a shower if you'd like. I'm sure some hot water will make you feel much better." Emily looked up, her eyes reflecting surprise and gratitude. How long had it been since she last enjoyed the warmth of hot water? Ever since losing her home and living on the streets, she had only known quick cold face washes in public restrooms. The thought of a hot shower seemed like a luxury she had never dared to dream of. Daniel gestured toward a hallway that led to the bathroom. "At the end of the hall to the right," he instructed. "I'll leave some of my sister's clothes outside the door for you. Feel free to use them. No need to feel awkward." Emily stood still for a moment, seemingly unsure of how to respond. Her expression softened, and then she whispered, "Thank you. I really don't know what to say." Daniel shook his head gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just let yourself feel a bit more comfortable." She nodded and quietly walked in the direction he had pointed. When the bathroom door closed behind her, Emily leaned against it, taking a deep breath. The warmth of the apartment, the faint scent of orange and cedar wood essential oils, felt like a dream she feared waking up from. Emily slowly approached the sink and looked into the large mirror hanging on the wall. Her own reflection startled her. Her face was pale, her hair disheveled, and the dark circles under her eyes were stark reminders of exhaustion. The traces of hardship etched on her features were unmistakable. She stared at herself for a moment, then turned on the faucet, letting the warm water flow, the steam rising like a promise of comfort. She shed her worn-out layers of clothing and stepped into the shower. The hot water cascaded over her, touching her cold skin, making her shiver, but not from the cold, rather from a sense of release. Each drop felt like it was washing away the weariness, the pain, and the humiliation of the past. Emily closed her eyes, allowing the water to pour over her, as if all the harshness of the outside world was being soothed. Meanwhile, outside, Daniel quietly moved around the apartment, rearranging everything. He prepared a plate of light snacks and poured 2 cups of hot tea, placing them on the table as he waited for Emily. What had this girl been through to become so strong and resilient? Little by little, he realized that it wasn't pity driving him to help her. There was something else, something deeper, that he couldn't yet name. Who's made it this far in the story? Comment coffee so we know you've been following closely. When Emily stepped out of the bathroom, steam still clinging to her damp hair, she was wearing a simple sweater and warm pants that belonged to Daniel's sister. The clean, soft clothes felt almost transformative compared to the cold days she had spent on the streets. Daniel turned around, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the slender girl dressed in his sister's clothes. Her beautiful face, though still tired, looked healthier and more at ease. "Feeling better?" he asked, his voice gentle and inviting. Emily hesitated but then nodded, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "Yes, I never imagined a hot shower could feel this wonderful." Daniel chuckled softly and gestured for her to sit by the table. "I made some tea for you. Have some to warm up." Emily sat down, her still slightly trembling hands reaching for the warm tea. The soothing aroma rose, chasing away the lingering chill in her heart. In this brief moment, she felt safe, as if all her suffering and worries had been pushed away. But she also knew that the world was never simple, and Daniel's kindness, though precious, left her wondering if she could truly trust the comfort he offered. Daniel tried to do everything he could to make Emily feel comfortable in his luxurious apartment, but he couldn't ignore the guarded look in her eyes whenever he got close. Emily wasn't used to unconditional kindness. She had lived a life where every act of generosity came with a price, and now, surrounded by a wealthy man and all the luxury around him, she couldn't help but feel skeptical. But Daniel was patient. He understood that trust couldn't be forced, but had to be built, little by little. Each day, Emily began contributing to Daniel's life. She cleaned the apartment, cooked simple yet delicious meals, and took care of the potted plants in the small garden that Daniel rarely paid attention to. She did everything with care and grace, transforming the once cold house into a place full of life. Daniel was impressed by her skill and the warmth she brought into everything she did. Emily was not just a beautiful woman. She was someone with a warm heart and an optimistic spirit unlike any he had ever known. Daniel found himself spending more time at home, using the excuse of working remotely. He often looked for reasons to talk to Emily, even if it was just to hear her gentle voice or catch the hint of a smile on her face. One day, after Emily had cooked a wonderful dinner of steaming stew and fragrant bread, Daniel couldn't hold back his admiration and praised her. "You really have a talent, Emily," he said, his gaze sincere. "I've never had a dinner that good." Emily, who was used to putting up defenses, gave a soft smile, but deep down she felt a warmth seep into the cold corners of her heart. Day by day, their relationship grew closer. One morning, while Emily was trimming roses in the small garden, Daniel approached her, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. He quietly stood there watching her work, not wanting to disturb her focus. Emily didn't immediately notice his presence, but when she turned around and saw Daniel's gentle gaze, she couldn't help but smile. "Here's your coffee," he said, his voice warm and deep. Emily wiped her dirty hands on a nearby towel, took the coffee cup, and let the warmth from it seep into her hands. The two of them sat down on a wooden bench in the garden, where the morning sunlight filtered through the branches, casting shimmering rays of light. Emily said, "There used to be a small garden like this in front of my house, too. My mother grew many flowers, and I would sit on the swing there until life took a turn. My parents died in a car accident. We lost our home, and then came the days of hardship on the streets." Her face grew briefly sad. Then she continued, "You don't usually sit in this garden, do you?" Daniel chuckled softly, his eyes holding a tenderness she hadn't noticed before. "No, I admit I rarely do," he replied. "But since you arrived, everything looks more beautiful." Emily blushed, feeling embarrassed, but she couldn't deny that her heart was beating a little faster. "Thank you so much. You've been so kind to me," she said. Daniel smiled in response. Emily and Daniel continued to share intimate moments, their bond growing stronger each day, and their feelings for each other deepening. One evening, after Emily had prepared a dinner they enjoyed together, they sat in the gentle glow of candlelight. The silence between them was no longer just quiet, but had become a safe space where they could be open with each other. Emily gave a soft smile when Daniel praised her cooking, and in that moment, their eyes met, creating a powerful connection that needed no words. Daniel lightly touched her hand, his fingers gently squeezing her small hand, and Emily felt a wave of indescribable emotion. "You know, ever since you came into my life, everything has changed," Daniel whispered, his voice husky, his gaze deep and meaningful. Emily looked at him, feeling her heart race in her chest. She wasn't sure when it happened, but she realized she felt safe and protected in his presence. As Daniel lifted her hand and his lips brushed the back of it, Emily felt the tenderness in his gesture. She didn't pull her hand away but allowed herself to sink into the warmth he offered. This closeness was new to her, breaking down the walls she had built to protect herself. Daniel stood up and held out his hand to her, his eyes shining in the candlelight. "Would you like to come up to the rooftop with me?" he asked, and Emily could only nod, feeling both nervous and excited. They went up to the rooftop together, where the star-filled night sky became the perfect backdrop for feelings they had yet to name. They sat close together on the long bench, and as a gentle breeze blew past, Daniel pulled the warm blanket around both of them. Emily shivered slightly, but not just from the cold. It was also from his closeness. When Daniel gently placed an arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer, she didn't resist. Instead, she leaned against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, a silent promise that he would always be by her side. They sat in silence for a moment, feeling each other's warmth, and then Daniel gently tilted his head, his lips brushing softly against her hair. Emily felt a wave of emotion rising within her. She looked up at him, her eyes soft but full of longing. Daniel leaned down, his lips coming closer, and when they met, it felt as though the entire world had stopped. Their kiss was gentle, exploring, but gradually deepened and grew more intense. Emily felt as if she were being swept away by a storm of emotions, where logic no longer existed, only the purest of feelings. Daniel held her tightly, as if he were afraid she might disappear if he let go. They no longer kept any distance, letting their emotions guide them, leading them into an intimacy that both had suppressed for far too long. They left the terrace, hand in hand, and as they entered the warm apartment, Emily felt the desire, love, and deep connection between them. Daniel gently led her to the bedroom, his eyes filled with tenderness. Emily no longer felt any hesitation. They let their emotions carry them, allowing the soft kisses and tender gestures to lead the way, turning that night into an unforgettable memory, marking a turning point in their relationship. Daniel and Emily had no idea that their love story had quickly reached the ears of the Carter family. News of the unexpected relationship between a young, wealthy businessman and a homeless girl spread rapidly, and soon their story reached Daniel's mother, Margaret Carter. Margaret Carter, a powerful, strict, and influential woman in society, couldn't believe what she was hearing. To her, the Carter family's honor was of the utmost importance, and she couldn't accept the thought that Daniel, the pride and future of the family, could fall in love with someone she deemed unworthy. In her eyes, Emily was nothing more than a leech, a stain that could tarnish the family's reputation and jeopardize Daniel's promising career. That evening, Margaret called Daniel, demanding that he come to the family mansion immediately. Her voice was firm, devoid of any emotion, but Daniel knew his mother well enough to recognize that she was far from pleased. He arrived at the mansion with a heart full of worry, sensing that this conversation would be anything but easy. When Daniel entered the living room, Mrs. Margaret was sitting in a luxurious leather armchair, holding a glass of red wine in one hand, her sharp gaze fixed directly on her son. Without waiting for him to speak, she said coldly, "Daniel, sit down," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for refusal. "We need to talk." Daniel slowly sat down, feeling the pressure from his mother's authoritative stare. "Mother, what's the matter?" he asked, though he knew full well the reason. "Have you considered the honor of our family?" Mrs. Margaret said, her voice full of anger and disappointment. "I heard you've been associating with a homeless girl. Do you realize what this will do to the Carter family's reputation?" Daniel took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mother, Emily is not what you think. She may be homeless, but she is a wonderful, strong, and intelligent person. She's been through a lot in life, and I love her for who she is, not for her circumstances." Mrs. Margaret frowned, her sharp eyes seeming to pierce into her son's soul. "Daniel, you cannot be serious about a girl like that. You are the heir of the Carter family, the one who will take over the company and uphold the legacy our family has built. You cannot let someone like her drag you down." Daniel felt his anger boil inside. He rarely went against his mother, but this time he couldn't just stand by and listen to such insults. "Mother, I don't have to choose who to love based on your approval or anyone else's. Emily is the one I want to be with, and I won't let you or anyone else ruin my relationship with her." Margaret set her wineglass down on the table, her gaze icy. "If you refuse to listen, I will have to intervene myself," she said, her voice laced with threat. "I won't let a low-class girl ruin this family's reputation. If necessary, I will pay her to leave you, or do whatever needs to be done." Daniel stood up, anger and disappointment surging through him. "Mother, I can't believe you would think of hurting Emily like that. She doesn't deserve to be treated this way. If you really love me, you will respect my choice." He turned and left, leaving his mother sitting there with a tense and furious expression. Margaret knew she would not let the matter end there. She was determined to do whatever it took to stop this relationship, even if it meant directly interfering in Emily's life. Meanwhile, Emily had no idea that a storm was brewing. In the days that followed, she continued her daily chores, cooked meals, and cherished her love with Daniel. However, she couldn't have imagined that she was about to face the biggest challenge since meeting Daniel. A confrontation with a powerful and conservative mother willing to do whatever it took to protect her family's reputation. Determined to put an end to the relationship, Margaret arranged a meeting with Emily. That afternoon, Emily received a message requesting a meeting at an upscale cafe in the heart of the city. The location sparkled with lights and was surrounded by elegantly dressed patrons, making her feel small and out of place. Despite her nervousness, Emily arrived on time, trying to stay calm, though her heart was filled with anxiety. Margaret sat in a corner of the cafe, looking elegant in a designer emerald green dress. Her hair was neatly tied up, and her sharp eyes followed Emily from a distance as she walked in. Emily approached, suppressing the fear rising in her chest, and sat down across from Margaret. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said, her tone polite but distant. Emily gave a slight nod, her hands clenched tightly together under the table. "What did you want to talk to me about?" "I'm Daniel's mother. I'm asking you to stay away from my son immediately." Margaret wasted no time. She placed a large stack of money on the table, an amount substantial enough to leave anyone stunned. Her gaze never wavered from Emily, exuding the confidence of someone wielding absolute power. "This is enough money for you to live comfortably, to start a new life anywhere," she said, each word crisp and resolute. "I want you to leave Daniel. You don't belong in our world, and I can't let you jeopardize his future." Emily felt her heart clench. Margaret's words cut through her pride like cold, merciless blades. But no matter how shaken she felt, Emily knew she couldn't back down. She met Margaret's authoritative eyes, summoning every ounce of courage to respond. "I love Daniel," Emily said, her voice trembling but sincere. "My love isn't something that can be bought. I can't leave him just because someone else thinks I'm unworthy." Margaret's brow furrowed, her expression unchanged, though a flicker of displeasure crossed her eyes. "Do you think love can change reality? The time will come when Daniel realizes this relationship is a mistake. You should understand that walking away is what's best for both of you." Emily lowered her head, her heart aching from Margaret's words. She knew her status was humble, that she had nothing but her love for Daniel. But that was precisely the thing she couldn't give up, even if the woman sitting across from her had the power to upend her life with a snap of her fingers. Emily lifted her gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "I can't take this money, and I can't leave Daniel. I love him truly, and I believe he loves me too. If that's wrong, then it's for us to decide, not anyone else." Margaret let out a cold laugh. "You'll regret this, Emily," she said, standing up, her eyes icy. "I will do whatever it takes to protect my son, even if you don't want me to." Emily remained seated, her heart pounding and her mind in turmoil. The encounter left a deep wound, making her question whether her love for Daniel could withstand the harsh trials ahead. But deep inside, Emily knew she couldn't let go, couldn't give up on the man she loved, no matter what stood against them. Emily felt weighed down after the encounter with Margaret. Although she tried to appear strong, the harsh words of the powerful woman still pierced deeply into her heart. She couldn't deny that Daniel's mother had a point. She came from a completely different world, one where hardship and struggle were the norm. Meanwhile, Daniel was the image of success and wealth, everything that seemed far removed from her life. One evening, Emily sat by the window of Daniel's apartment, gazing at the star-filled sky. She wondered if Margaret was right, that she was just a worthless person in this world of luxury. But every time she thought about leaving Daniel, her heart ached. He had given her a sense of love and safety she hadn't felt since she lost everything. Daniel had made her believe that she deserved happiness, but now doubts and insecurities were beginning to creep into her mind. Daniel noticed that something had changed in Emily. She was quieter, no longer smiling brightly or acting as carefree as before. One night, he found her sitting by the window, her face sad and her eyes distant. He approached her, gently wrapping his arms around her. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle and full of concern. Emily turned to look at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I don't know," she sighed. "I feel like I'm not good enough for you. I don't want to be the reason you have to choose between your family and me. Daniel's heart tightened at her words. He held her hand firmly, trying to give her strength through his sincerity. Emily, you are the one I love. No one, not even my mother, can change that. You don't have to bear this unfair treatment alone. Emily looked into his eyes, feeling the determination and deep love he had for her. But she was still worried, knowing that this battle would not be easy. Margaret was not someone who gave up easily, and Emily knew that it could lead to unforeseeable consequences. Margaret continued her efforts to drive the couple apart. She often visited Daniel's apartment unannounced, bringing with her accusations and criticism. Daniel, do you really want to spend your life on this? She looked at Emily with a cold gaze, making Emily feel exposed and judged. You need to think about your future, your career, and the family's reputation. Daniel tried to remain calm, but anger flared up inside him. Mother, Emily is the one I love. I don't care what others think. We don't need your approval to be happy. Margaret clenched her fists, her eyes filled with disappointment. Do you think love will sustain you, Daniel? Do you think someone like her can walk beside you in this world? Wake up! Emily stood there, hearing each word like a dagger cutting into her heart. She wanted to speak up, to defend their love, but the feeling of helplessness and pain made her throat tighten. She wondered if she had the strength to continue. What do you think? Was Daniel right to stand up to his mother to defend Emily? Share your thoughts in the comments. After Margaret left, Daniel held Emily close, feeling her body trembling. Don't let my mother hurt you, he whispered, his voice breaking with anger and sorrow. You mean everything to me, and I won't let anyone destroy that. Emily clung to him, feeling a deep fear rising inside her. Their love was real, the most beautiful thing she had ever experienced. But was it strong enough to withstand the prejudices and pressures of a world she had never belonged to? Spring had just begun to blossom, and warm sunlight filtered through the windows of Daniel's apartment. But Emily's heart was weighed down by a secret she had just discovered. Lately, her body had shown unusual signs: fatigue, bouts of nausea, and extreme sensitivity. One morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Emily held a pregnancy test with two clear lines. She was pregnant. The news left her stunned, overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. Emily stepped out of the bathroom, confusion flooding her with every step. She sat down on the chair, her hand resting on her belly, where a new life was forming inside. She knew this news should bring happiness, but for her it felt like a new challenge she had no idea how to face. All day Emily thought about how to tell Daniel. She couldn't hide it forever, but she also couldn't shake off the worry in her heart. How would Daniel react? Would he feel trapped, or would their lives be completely upended? When evening came, Daniel returned home, his face lit up after a long day of work. Emily waited for him in the living room, her hands nervously twisting together as she tried to stay calm. As Daniel stepped in, he immediately noticed the anxiety on her face. "Emily, what's wrong?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Daniel's warm gaze. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." He walked over, sat down beside her, and gently took her hands as if to reassure her. "What is it? Tell me." Emily bit her lip, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm pregnant," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. Daniel froze for a moment, his eyes widening in shock. But then, a radiant smile spread across his face. "Really?" he exclaimed, joy shining in every word. "We're going to have a baby?" Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't hide her emotions, both joy and fear. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I can't believe it," he whispered, his voice full of love. "I'll always be here for you and our baby. We'll get through everything together." Daniel's promise felt like a soothing balm, but Emily knew reality wouldn't be that simple. She still felt uneasy about her place in his luxurious world, where she was always seen as an outsider, and her worries quickly became a reality when the news reached Margaret Carter. Margaret didn't waste time reacting. When she learned that Emily was carrying Daniel's child, her anger erupted like an uncontrollable flame. She arranged to meet Emily again, this time not at a cafe, but right in Daniel's apartment while he was away. Emily sat on the sofa, facing Margaret, a sense of unease rising in her as she saw the cold, piercing gaze of the powerful woman. "Emily," Margaret began, her voice sharp as a knife, "I didn't think things would go this far. A child? Do you think this will secure your hold on Daniel?" Emily clenched her hands, trying to stay strong. "I have no intention of using my child to tie Daniel down," she replied, her voice firm with determination. "I love him, and this child is a result of that love." Margaret's lips curled into a sneer. "Love? Do you really think your love will change anything? You don't belong in our world. Daniel needs a woman with the right background and status, not a homeless girl with nothing to her name." She stood up, walked over to the table, and placed a thick envelope on it. "This is a significant amount of money," she said, her gaze never leaving Emily. "It's enough for you to live a comfortable life anywhere. I demand that you leave Daniel immediately, and if you truly have any self-respect, you will get rid of this baby." Emily froze, her heart feeling as though it was being squeezed. She had never imagined she would be put in such a cruel position. Margaret's words were a shock, a deep wound to her heart. Emily felt the tears welling up, but she swallowed them down, refusing to break down in front of the woman who was trying to destroy her fragile hope. "No," Emily said, her voice trembling as she placed her hands over her stomach, but her eyes were filled with determination. "I will not take your money, and I will not get rid of this baby. This is mine and Daniel's child, and I will protect it to the end." Margaret was furious, her eyes blazing with anger. "You will regret this," she said, her voice cold and cutting. "I will not let you ruin my son's life." Emily sat alone in the apartment, and finally her tears began to fall. The weight of the pressure, torn between love and responsibility, between the life of her child and the relentless threats from this powerful woman, pressed heavily on her shoulders. But no matter what, she knew she had to stay strong, for love and for the baby growing inside her. Emily continued to keep the tense meeting with Margaret a secret. The pressure from the threats and the disdain of that powerful woman grew heavier on her mind each day. With each passing day, Emily felt anxiety and insecurity eating away at her, wounding the fragile happiness she and Daniel had just begun to experience. One evening, as the sunset painted golden hues on the walls of their apartment, Emily sat waiting for Daniel to come home. The sound of keys jingling at the door echoed, and soon he stepped inside. The warm smile on his face quickly gave way to worry as he saw Emily's tense expression. "Emily, is something wrong?" Daniel asked, hurrying to her side, sitting down and taking her hand. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "Daniel, I'm fine," she replied, her voice trembling. "Or do you feel unwell?" Daniel asked, his concern deepening. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she answered, "Your mother came by today." Daniel froze, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. He knew that his mother had come to pressure Emily, especially after finding out that Emily was pregnant. Daniel stood up, his face flushed with rage. "I'll talk to her," he said, his voice shaking. "She has no right to dictate our lives or what happens to this baby. Emily, you are my family, and so is our child. No one, not even my mother, can separate us." The determination and fierce protectiveness in Daniel's words moved Emily deeply. She had once feared that the gap between their worlds would be too vast, that the pressures from his family would drive him away from her. But now she realized that Daniel not only loved her, but was also ready to fight for their little family. Daniel didn't hesitate. He walked straight out of the apartment, leaving Emily sitting there, worried and waiting. Her heart raced, afraid of how the confrontation between him and Margaret would unfold. But deep down, she knew Daniel had to do this, not just for her, but for himself as well. Daniel drove to the family mansion, the place where he had grown up under his mother's strict protection. As he stepped into the expansive living room, he saw Margaret sitting there, a composed expression on her face as if she had anticipated her son's arrival. She set her teacup down, her cold eyes meeting Daniel's directly. "Daniel, I knew you would come," she said, her voice calm but full of implication. Daniel didn't sit. He stood facing her, his gaze as sharp as a blade. "You have no right to interfere in my life, especially when it comes to my relationship," he said firmly. "Emily and the baby are my family, and I won't let you destroy that." Margaret raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor disrupted by surprise. She hadn't expected her son to stand before her, challenging the authority she had wielded for so many years. "Daniel, you don't understand. I'm trying to protect you," she said, attempting to hold her ground. "She's not right for you. And this child is mine, my flesh and blood," Daniel interrupted, his voice erupting in the otherwise quiet room. "Do you even realize what you're asking for? You're asking me to destroy an innocent life just because you don't like Emily. That's not protection, that's tyranny." Margaret stood up, her eyes blazing with determination. "Daniel, I raised you to understand that the family's honor and status must be protected at all costs. If you continue with that girl, your career and future will be ruined." Daniel looked at his mother, a painful mix of sorrow and disappointment washing over him. "If you can't accept the family I choose, then that's your problem," he said, his voice low and resolute. "I won't let you destroy what matters most in my life." Margaret stood there, shocked by her son's resolve. She never thought that Daniel, whom she had raised to be strong and successful, would reject the values she had imposed on him. But Daniel didn't waver. He knew this was his heart's choice, and he had no regrets. If you love stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss more heartfelt tales. Returning home, Daniel found Emily waiting for him, her face full of worry. He walked over, gently pulling her into his arms, and whispered, "I've spoken clearly with my mother. We'll get through everything together because I love you and our baby." Emily felt tears well up, but this time they were tears of happiness and relief. Daniel's unwavering support was the light that drove away the shadows surrounding her. No matter how harsh the challenges ahead, she knew their love was real and nothing could shake it. Time passed and each day brought new challenges for Emily and Daniel. Emily's pregnancy was far from easy. She often had to visit the hospital for regular checkups, each visit laden with tension and anxiety. The doctors constantly warned about potential risks for both mother and baby, sparking unprecedented fears in Emily. Every time she sat in the clinic, she held Daniel's hand tightly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing her only anchor. Daniel stayed by her side without leaving for a moment, his eyes betraying his worry, though he always tried to maintain a calm exterior to reassure her. Despite the demands of his work, which required his presence and focus, Daniel put aside all career priorities to devote himself entirely to caring for Emily. He rearranged his schedule, cut down on important meetings, and even turned down major projects to ensure he wouldn't be away from her. Daniel's love and steadfastness became Emily's greatest source of encouragement during those trying days. When she felt exhausted and worn out, Daniel was always there, holding her hand and softly whispering words of comfort. "I'll always be here, never letting you go through anything alone," he said, his deep voice soothing her anxious heart. However, their love wasn't always enough to calm the waves of worry that surged within Emily. She couldn't stop fearing the worst that could happen. On sleepless nights, Emily often got up and quietly went to the balcony, breathing in the cool night air to soothe her soul. Daniel, though tired, would wake up and join her, wrapping his arms around her from behind and whispering that everything would be all right. But beyond the hardships of pregnancy, Emily also had to face the invisible pressure from Margaret. Daniel's mother, despite witnessing her son's sacrifice and dedication, still could not accept Emily. She believed that this woman was unworthy of Daniel's love and care. Deep in Margaret's heart, a fragile sliver of hope clung to the idea that Emily would give up, or that something would happen to make Daniel come to his senses and return to the life she had envisioned for him. Margaret silently observed them from afar, always keeping up her cold and composed facade. Yet her heart couldn't help but waver at times when she saw her son smile tenderly at Emily, his eyes full of love and protection. The way Daniel defended and cared for Emily, how he resolutely stood by her side despite all challenges, made Margaret feel conflicted. But she stubbornly refused to change her views, convincing herself that she was only trying to protect her family and Daniel's future. The day Emily gave birth arrived sooner than expected, bringing with it a storm of emotions filled with anxiety and fear. It was a gloomy morning when Emily suddenly experienced intense labor pains and had to be rushed to the hospital immediately. Daniel drove to the hospital in a state of tension, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, continuously praying for the safety of both mother and child. Emily lay on the hospital bed, sweat soaking her forehead and her breath coming in rapid gasps. She gripped Daniel's hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Daniel," she whispered, her voice weak. Daniel leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers, his gaze filled with worry but more resolute than ever. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm here, and we'll get through this, together." The birth was far from smooth. Baby Lucas was born prematurely, so small and fragile that he had to be taken immediately to the neonatal intensive care unit. Emily, exhausted, slipped into a fitful sleep, while Daniel stood motionless, staring at his son lying in the incubator, breathing tubes and life support wires encircling the tiny body. It felt as if his heart was being crushed. The following days were an endless cycle of tension. Emily and Daniel sat beside Lucas, watching every faint breath and praying daily for their son's health. Both of them were physically and emotionally drained, but they could not give up. Every moment in that cold hospital room only brought them closer together and made them stronger. Whenever Emily felt like she couldn't endure any longer, Daniel would take her hand, giving her strength and faith. "Lucas is a fighter, just like you," he whispered, his voice trembling yet steadfast. "We will get through this together." Margaret, who initially held a firm and rigid stance, couldn't help but be moved when she saw her grandson lying in the incubator, small but fiercely fighting for his life. She came to the hospital, standing outside the NICU and looking through the thick glass. Her heart sank at the sight, and for the first time she felt the pain her son was enduring. She began to realize that the love and determination Daniel had for Emily were not things that could be shaken. She saw Daniel's exhausted but still hopeful eyes, the way he held Emily's hand without letting go, and the determination they shared as they stood by their son. A gradual change began to take place in Margaret's heart, but she was not yet ready to acknowledge it. As time passed, Lucas began to show the first signs of recovery. Every small movement or blink of his eyes felt like a surge of strength for Emily and Daniel. They knew the journey ahead was still long, but the light of hope had started to flicker, and they were no longer as afraid as before. Daniel and Emily not only learned how to be parents, but also learned how to grow stronger with each passing day. Every night, they held each other as they fell asleep, whispering promises to always protect and love one another, no matter the difficulties. And with each small milestone that Lucas achieved, they felt the miracle of life more deeply, realizing that their love could overcome any challenge. After weeks of anxiety, anticipation, and sleepless nights beside their son's hospital bed, the moment Daniel and Emily had been longing for finally arrived. The doctors announced that Lucas was healthy enough to be discharged and return home. The two couldn't hide their joy and happiness as they gently carried their little boy, carefully stepping out of the hospital. They sighed with relief, their hearts swelling with the prospect of their home being filled with laughter and love. Daniel's apartment, which had once been a cold and lonely space, now seemed more vibrant than ever. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating every corner of the room, which was now decorated with baby toys, diapers, and colorful drawings. The sweet sound of Lucas's laughter, whether being sung to sleep by his mother or cradled by his father, filled the house with warmth and life. Margaret Carter, who had once adamantly opposed Daniel and Emily's relationship, couldn't help but be moved by the transformation in her son and his new family. Although she still bore scars from the past and hadn't fully accepted Emily, seeing Lucas, her grandson, growing up healthy began to soften her heart. Margaret gradually started visiting more often, bringing small gifts for her grandson and cherishing moments watching Daniel and Emily care for Lucas. She stayed for dinner with the family, observing Emily busily preparing a delicious meal in the kitchen while Daniel played with Lucas on the floor. Margaret's gaze softened. She didn't say much, but in her heart, she began to understand that her son's true happiness didn't lie in wealth or fame, but in the love and bond of family. Even though Margaret had started to accept Emily, she still had her worries. She fretted about Daniel's future and the sacrifices he had made to be with Emily. There were times when she couldn't hide her doubts, and this sometimes led to moments of tension within the family. Yet gradually, she couldn't deny that Emily had brought a positive change to her son's life. Daniel and Emily stood strong together, facing the skeptical glances and whispers from society around them. They refused to let gossip shake their love and determination. On the contrary, each challenge only made them stronger, teaching them how to protect each other and their little family. Lucas grew up day by day, becoming the pride and joy of both Daniel and Emily. He was healthy, cheerful, and brought endless laughter to the family. Moments of the family gathering together were a testament to the power of love and patience. From a very young age, Lucas began to show exceptional talent, especially in mathematics. Even as a little boy, he could solve complex calculations that even adults might struggle with. By the time he started the elementary school, Lucas was dubbed a math prodigy by his teachers for his remarkable ability to tackle challenging problems with sharp logic and intuition. His talent not only made his family proud, but also caught the attention of prestigious educational institutions. Margaret, who had previously kept her distance, began to take a more active role in their lives. She even started helping Emily care for Lucas, not only supporting his upbringing, but also encouraging and nurturing his extraordinary gift. Between Emily and Margaret, two women who had initially faced a rocky start, a mutual respect and understanding gradually emerged as they shared their love for Lucas and worked together to support him on his promising journey of growth and discovery. Emily continued to strive to prove herself, but she knew she no longer had to fight alone. She had Daniel, the man who had chosen her and would always stand by her side, no matter the obstacles. And now she also had a family, a place where she truly belonged. The love story of Daniel and Emily, from intense opposition to acceptance and harmony, is a journey filled with emotion and resilience. They prove that happiness isn't easily attained, but with enough patience and faith, love can overcome any barrier. And in the end, even hearts that were once broken can be healed. Thank you for watching the entire video. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Please leave your score in the comments. Click subscribe and turn on the notification bell to follow more heartwarming stories from our channel. Want to see more touching stories? Click on the end screen here to explore more. Mira was 12 years old when a terrible accident took away the most loving mother she had, leaving an unfillable void in her young heart. Shortly afterward, her father remarried, hoping that a new family might heal some of the emotional wounds. But her stepmother, Lydia, was nothing like the figure Mira had wished for. When her father passed away from a severe illness a year later, Lydia revealed her true cold and ruthless nature. Mira was forced to do all the housework and had to take on a job at a small bookstore in town to help support the household financially. Amid a harsh life devoid of love, Mira had one precious source of comfort: Evan. At 15, he was the son of a poor farming family in town. Evan always showed Mira special care and became her closest friend. He was her protector and comforter whenever she felt helpless or tired. Together, they often escaped from their harsh reality, dreaming of a brighter future, even though they knew the path to happiness would be far from easy. Under the shade of an old tree by the lake, where the rustling leaves seemed to listen to their stories, Mira would passionately talk about the books she secretly read while working at the bookstore. Those pages opened up a vast world full of hope and dreams before her eyes. Evan, with his bright eyes and determined heart, often promised that one day he would become successful and take Mira away from her difficult life. One day, Evan said, his gaze steady but gentle, "I'll take you away from here. We'll have a better life, I promise." Despite the many challenges of reality, Mira believed in that promise, believed in the light that Evan brought, a light that kept her moving forward even when everything seemed to be against her. Welcome to today's story, a meaningful tale about the power of love, perseverance, and kindness. It's a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how distance and time may test the human heart, true love will always find its way back. Before we begin the story, let us know which city you're watching from by commenting below. The small bookstore sat humbly on the corner of Main Street with old wooden shelves filled with books. For Mira, this place wasn't just a job. It was a magical space where she could escape the hardships of life with her stepmother. Each day, after finishing her tasks of cleaning and organizing books as Mr. Lawrence, the kind old owner, required, Mira would immerse herself in the world of books. She became absorbed in medical texts, teaching herself about anatomy, pathology, and healing methods. Each time she turned a page, Mira felt a flame ignite in her heart. She dreamed of becoming a doctor one day, someone who could heal others' pain, just as she wished to heal the wounds in her own heart and bring hope to the suffering people in her town. Sometimes Mr. Lawrence would notice the young girl sitting under the soft yellow light, reading thick books with eyes full of a thirst for knowledge. He would smile kindly, quietly admiring her diligence and intelligence. Even though Mira's life was filled with difficulties, she never let them extinguish her passion for learning and her dreams. In those rare moments between her many chores, Mira would carefully jot down important things she learned from the books into a small notebook she carried, always determined to keep learning. Evan also knew about Mira's dream. On afternoons when they met under the old tree by the lakeside, Mira would often tell Evan about the wonders she had read about. "I want to help those in need," she said, her eyes shining brightly. "If I can become a doctor, I'll heal people so they won't have to suffer like my mom did." Evan sat beside her, listening and feeling the strength and immense compassion she carried. He knew that Mira was not only strong, but also full of ambition. It made him even more determined to keep his promise to change both of their lives. But they both understood that the road ahead would be difficult, especially with Mira having to face her stepmother's cruelty and the heavy responsibilities on her shoulders. Despite the hardships, Mira kept working diligently, holding on to her faith in the future. She knew that every page she read, every piece of knowledge she absorbed, was like a brick building her dream of becoming a doctor and a tool to help her escape from a life of struggle, moving towards one of greater purpose. Evan was always a steadfast support for Mira during those stormy childhood years. When her cold stepmother made life even heavier and her work at the bookstore became exhausting at times, Evan was there to bring smiles and words of encouragement. He quietly took care of her, from shielding her from the rain to sharing the dreams they both cherished. Their friendship, over time, grew into a deep bond that needed no words, but was evident in every look, every action. Their friendship blossomed into a love that grew stronger each day. When Evan turned 20, he knew he couldn't stay in the town forever. His family was still poor, and opportunities for a better life never came easily. He decided to leave for the big city to find work, hoping to earn enough money to change both his and Mira's futures. Before leaving, Evan took Mira to their familiar spot, the old tree by the lake, where so many childhood memories were held. "Mira," Evan said, his voice deep and resolute, his eyes shining with determination. "I promise I'll come back. I'll do whatever it takes to build a better future and take you away from this place. You have to promise me that you'll wait and never give up on your dreams." Mira looked at him, tears shimmering in her gentle brown eyes, but she tried to hold them back. She knew Evan was doing the right thing, but the thought of parting still made her heart ache. She nodded, her small hand clutching his, holding on as if trying to savor every remaining moment. "I promise," Mira said, her voice soft but filled with determination. "I'll wait, and I'll keep studying, keep dreaming. No matter where you are, I'll never forget you." Evan leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, a farewell full of love and tenderness. "I'll come back," he repeated, as if that promise was the only thing that could keep them connected, no matter the distance or time. Who made it to this part? Comment "coffee" so we know you're someone who has closely followed the story. And then he left, leaving Mira standing under the old oak tree, watching his silhouette fade into the twilight. Even though her heart was heavy with sorrow, Evan's promise became a guiding light, helping her to keep living and fighting for her dreams. Every day at the bookstore, every time she turned the pages of a medical book, Mira thought about their promise, holding on to hope and strength. The years passed and Mira grew stronger and smarter. She held on to her dream of becoming a doctor as a way to fulfill the beautiful aspirations she and Evan had once shared. Meanwhile, in the distant city, Evan never stopped thinking about her, working tirelessly to make his old promise a reality. Evan left the town empty-handed, but with an iron will. The early days in the city were far from easy. He did whatever jobs he could to survive, from loading cargo in warehouses to repairing machinery. Despite the backbreaking work and harsh life, Evan never lost sight of his goal, to build a better life so he could return for Mira. During his most exhausting moments, he always thought of her hopeful eyes, which gave him the strength to keep going. In his spare time, Evan educated himself. He read books about business, finance, and investing, and even enrolled in night classes to further his knowledge. Gradually, he transitioned from manual labor to a sales position where his intelligence and persuasive skills quickly caught the attention of influential entrepreneurs. His first big opportunity came when a trusted investor gave him a chance to participate in a promising real estate project. Through determination and keen insight, Evan successfully doubled the initial investment. From there, his career soared. He founded his own company and continued to grow his wealth through real estate deals and investments in technology. In less than a decade, Evan went from being a poor young man to a self-made billionaire, owning skyscrapers and leading major corporations. Despite living in the limelight of wealth, Evan never let luxury cloud his mind or heart. He was constantly surrounded by beautiful women, eager to do anything to win his attention. Yet Evan remained faithful to the memory of Mira, the small-town girl he had loved since his impoverished youth. Whenever he thought about her smile, about the afternoons they spent by the lake sharing dreams, his heart felt warm and at peace. Even though he had everything most people could ever dream of, Evan knew deep down that his success was incomplete. He understood that he needed to return to fulfill his old promise, to free Mira from her constrained life and build a bright future together with her. When Evan left town, Mira continued working diligently at the bookstore, the place that had nurtured her dreams and knowledge. The years spent working there not only deepened her understanding of medicine through the old books, but also honed her resilience and determination. Mira was passionate about reading and learning, and bit by bit, she accumulated knowledge and grew her dream of becoming a doctor, not just to escape her difficult life, but also to help the poor people in town, those she witnessed daily in their helplessness. Mira continued working hard at the bookstore, constantly expanding her knowledge and nurturing her dream of becoming a doctor. The hardships she endured shaped her into a strong and resilient young woman, though they couldn't hide her natural beauty. Mira grew into a stunning woman, with clear, bright eyes and a gentle smile that could captivate anyone's heart. Her beauty and intelligence quickly drew the attention of many young men in town, especially the wealthy ones who eagerly sought to win her affection. However, Mira's stepmother, who had long seen her as a burden, now viewed her beauty as an opportunity for personal gain. She continually pressured Mira to marry a wealthy young man from town who could bring great benefits to their family. This young man, despite his flashy appearance and solid social status, couldn't stir Mira's heart. Despite the heavy pressure from her stepmother, Mira firmly rejected every arranged marriage. Her heart remained devoted to Evan, the boy who had stood by her side through tough times, the one she had silently entrusted with her love and faith. Whenever she remembered Evan's promise from years ago, Mira felt strengthened, resisting oppression and remaining steadfast in her dreams. The love and memories of Evan were her source of motivation, helping her endure every hardship, as she continued to hope that one day he would return and fulfill the promise that had kept her alive and waiting all these years. Mira never stopped expanding her knowledge. Finally, through relentless effort, she earned a scholarship to a prestigious medical school. It was an opportunity she had never dared to dream of, but with the support of kind people in town who admired her dedication and kindness, Mira bravely embarked on this new journey, carrying with her a burning belief and hope. The years of medical training were not easy. Mira had to balance her studies with part-time jobs to cover expenses, but she never gave up. She thought of Evan's promise and their shared dream of a brighter future. The memories of Evan and her deep love for him gave her the strength to persevere whenever she felt exhausted. Mira never allowed herself to forget the boy who had protected and comforted her when she was a miserable little girl. Eventually, Mira graduated from medical school with outstanding achievements and became a talented doctor. She returned to the small town where she had grown up in hardship, dedicating her strength and hope that Evan would one day come back for her. She opened a free clinic for the poor, treating patients with all the compassion and dedication she had. Mira was not only a healer of physical ailments, but also a beacon of hope for many townspeople. Even though she had grown up and achieved success, Mira still always thought of Evan. She had no idea that he had become a wealthy and successful man. She only remembered the image of the poor boy with a warm smile and bright eyes as they sat together under the tree, sharing impossible dreams. His promise was a silent source of strength in her heart, and Mira kept waiting, hoping that one day Evan would return as he had promised, and they would be together again, free from obstacles and pain. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss other touching tales. One snowy day, as the world outside was blanketed in white, Mira was busy tending to an elderly patient when she heard a commotion outside her small clinic. She looked up and glanced through the window, seeing people gathering with excitement and curiosity, murmuring about someone who had just arrived. Some said it was a young billionaire, someone who had returned to the town after many years away. Mira smiled slightly, dismissing it as just another rumor, and went back to her work. She could never have imagined that the moment that would change her life was about to arrive. A few minutes later, the door to the clinic opened. Mira was still focused on arranging medical tools when she heard footsteps echoing in the small room. She turned around and froze. Evan was standing in front of her, but he was no longer the poor farm boy she remembered. He wore an elegant suit, radiating confidence in the demeanor of someone who had faced countless challenges. Yet his eyes were still warm and bright as ever, and when he looked at Mira, they sparkled as though he had found a missing piece of himself. "Mira," Evan spoke, his voice trembling slightly, not out of fear but from emotion. His heart seemed to light up at the sight of the girl he had never forgotten, the one who had always been a guiding light through his lonely and difficult years. Mira felt the world slow down, her eyes wide with disbelief at what she was seeing. "Evan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She didn't know what to do, run into his arms or hold back, afraid that this was only a dream. Evan took a step toward her, then another, until he was standing right in front of her. "I promised I'd come back," he said, a gentle smile on his lips, but his eyes held an indescribable depth of feeling. "And I've kept that promise." Mira stood there, emotions flooding through her. She couldn't stop the tears from streaming down her face. She had grown up, become a doctor who saved lives, but deep in her heart, she was still that girl who clung to a promise from years ago. She couldn't believe that Evan had kept his word, that he had truly come back to her after all those years apart. The room suddenly felt warmer in the cold of winter, as if the years of waiting had melted away in this moment of reunion. Evan could no longer hold back his emotions. He reached out and gently touched Mira's cheek, wiping away her tears. "I never forgot you, Mira. Nothing in this world could ever replace you in my heart." Mira laughed through her tears, feeling as though all the pain and hardship she had endured had suddenly vanished. "I never forgot you either," she replied, her voice trembling but filled with happiness. Then, in the presence of the patients and townspeople eagerly watching through the window, they embraced as if nothing in the world could ever separate them again. Their reunion was not just the return of a love that had once been torn apart. It was proof that true love could overcome time, distance, and the harshest of trials. Mira and Evan, who had once dreamed of a brighter future, had found each other again, and their story was only just beginning. Evan looked into Mira's eyes, his gaze full of hope and love. In a moment where everything around them seemed to stop, he took a small red velvet box out of his pocket. Mira held her breath, her heart pounding as Evan gently knelt down, his eyes never leaving her face. "Mira," he said, his voice sincere and full of emotion, "I've traveled far, seen the dazzling lights, and lived in the glamorous world I once dreamed of. But not a moment passed when I didn't think of you. You have always been the flame that warmed my heart, the reason I never forgot our promise from long ago." Tears welled up in Mira's eyes once more. She couldn't believe this moment was real, that her dear friend, the boy she had loved since they were young, was now kneeling before her, ready to give her the world. "Mira," Evan continued, his voice trembling with emotion, "you've grown into an incredible woman, strong and full of love. I can't imagine my life without you by my side. Let me make up for all the years you had to endure loss and loneliness. Let me take you to a better life, where we can be happy together forever." He opened the box, revealing a sparkling diamond ring that glistened in the light. "Mira, will you marry me?" Mira looked at the man before her, who had once been the boy who protected her, who shared her childhood dreams, and who had now become a successful billionaire. She felt the strength of the love and loyalty that Evan had held on to, which had helped him withstand all the temptations and luxuries of the world. She thought about everything she had been through, the struggles, the lonely days, and the hopes she had always kept in her heart. With a warm smile and tears shining in her eyes, Mira nodded. "Yes, Evan," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "I will marry you." The people in the clinic, from elderly patients to Mira's colleagues, clapped and cheered, blessing the couple. The afternoon sunlight streamed in, illuminating their faces as if the sun itself was congratulating them. Evan stood up and wrapped Mira in a tight embrace, his heart overflowing with happiness. They kissed amidst the cheers of those around them, knowing that they had finally found each other again, and that their love had triumphed over every obstacle to reunite once more. We have many more exciting stories waiting for you to discover. Click on the links on the end screen. Despite being apart and going through different journeys, Mira and Evan realize that no matter how the world changes, true love will always bring them back together, guiding the way to a future full of hope and happiness. Mira and Evan left the town, holding each other's hands with a wide-open future ahead of them. The evening shadows gradually descended, but the radiant light of faith and love between them continued to shine brightly. They had endured the difficult years, the days of longing and separation, and challenges that seemed insurmountable. But now they were beginning a new chapter together, filled with hope and happiness. Mira was no longer the young girl who worked tirelessly at the small bookstore while silently nurturing her dreams. Now she had become a skilled and compassionate doctor, dedicating her heart to saving those who needed her the most. She knew that the days spent working in the bookstore had shaped the person she was today, a strong and empathetic woman. Mira continued her mission, not only healing illnesses but also spreading warmth and hope to everyone around her. Evan, the boy who had left town with nothing but big dreams, had now become a successful billionaire. But wealth had never dimmed his heart. He remained the young man with eyes full of faith and loyalty to his first love. Many women surrounded Evan, but he never wavered because his heart belonged only to Mira, the one who had shared childhood dreams with him and given him the strength to overcome every challenge. They decided to use Evan's wealth and influence to establish a free medical center for the poor, providing health care and better opportunities for the town where they had grown up. The center was not only a symbol of their love and success, but also a heartfelt thank you to the land that had witnessed their growth and love. The story of Mira and Evan is a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and compassion. It reminds us that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how distance and time may test the human heart, true love will always find its way back, reuniting two souls to continue their journey together. Hand in hand and with hearts full of faith, they stepped into the future, knowing that life would continue to bring challenges, but now they had each other to face everything together. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss other touching stories. Did you find this story meaningful? Please rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments.